This training video segment is going to cover formations. The simple formations of like a linear line, the simple formations of a massed formation, a proper column, squares, national characteristic formations like the Austrian battalion mass or the English four-rank line, the open order or skirmisher formations, the various stages of or degrees of skirmishing or open order capabilities, the status of how you reflect an artillery batteries in a state of movement, i.e. limbered, or a state of position ready to fire, i.e. unlimbered. And then last but least, we will cover the state of the unit itself. Is it in good order, good standing, or is it in a state of morale disorder? It's nervous, it's uncertain as to its future it will be. Or worst case scenario, it's already taken its future in its own hands and has decided to run from the field in a state of rout. All this will be covered in the training segments you'll forthcoming to see. First one I'm going to start off with, of course, is the linear formation. And a linear formation is quite easy to describe. It's a single rank of figures with all the figures of a unit in a single rank. There's no figures directly behind from the same unit. It's all a single rank of figures. And it could be just like this for an infantry battalion. Got another one back here of this Austrian. Or it could be a cavalry regiment, like these French dragoons are in a single rank formation. All of these are considered linear, and as such will receive firepower as a linear target, assuming that there's no unit directly behind their front rank. Just as a comparative analysis, this is a proper column formation. As you can see, there's figures in the rear ranks, so therefore by definition it cannot be linear automatically. This next segment is going to cover massed formations. And massed formations include things like columns, i.e. proper columns, any multiple rank formation, and squares. But I'll cover squares in the next segment. Basically what I'm going to cover now is the difference between a massed formation and a column formation. A column formation, or proper column formation, has more figures in the rear ranks compared to the number of figures in the front rank, and gets to utilize a column movement rate. So for example, this French Léger battalion has got 3 figures in the front and 6 figures in the rear ranks, so it's considered a proper column. The same for this Austrian battalion, which is out here on the far right. As a comparison, note the line which we have here in the back as a reference for a linear unit. It has no figures in the rear ranks. As you can see on the left side, we have a cavalry regiment of French dragoons in a proper column. 2 figures in the front rank, 3 figures in the rear. Now if you change the formation to reflect a status of, let's say for instance 3 to 2, like here, this would be considered a massed formation because by definition there's figures in the rear ranks behind the front rank, so automatically it makes it a massed formation. But it's not considered a column or a proper column formation because it's got, in this example, 3 figures in the front and only 2 in the rear. So it would use the basic cavalry movement rates. Just as a side note, cavalry doesn't get any differences in its movement rate between linear and column, but infantry does. So let's go back over to the infantry segment here. If I change this French Léger battalion to be representative of, let's say, a 5x4, it looks like a column, but it's basically a double rank of sets of lines, really. And this would move at linear rate because we have 5 figures in the front compared to only 4 figures in the rear. For me to have this as a column, I could do something like this. And this would be considered a proper column for column or movement rate. I've got 4 in the front, but I have 5 figures in the rear, so it meets the definition of a proper column. More figures in the rear compared to the frontage or the front rank of the unit. And depending upon the size of the unit, you might have different numbers of figures involved. If you only had 7 figures, for instance, this would not be a proper column. But if I changed it to something like this, this would be a proper column because there's 4 in the rear compared to 3 in the front. If I only had 6 figures to be a proper column, I'd probably have to form it in a formation like this. 4 in the rear, 2 in the front. Because a formation of 3x2, or basically a set of double ranked lines, is not a proper column and would move at linear rate because it's 3 figures wide in the front and only 3 figures in the rear ranks, equal to, not greater. For a 5-figure unit, proper column would look like this. If it came down to a 4-figure unit, this would be considered not a proper column because it's 2 to 2. So you would have to change it in such a way to be reflective like that, for instance. Very narrow. And as the smaller units get less in numbers of figures, you'll find the options of making proper columns out of them makes it harder and harder. So, in recap, a proper column has got more figures in the rear compared to the number of figures in the front rank. 3 to verse 6. A massed formation is any formation of figures which has a rank of figures behind the front figure group. And just a little sidebar note. If this actually was a single unit of French cavalry here, and there was another regiment of cavalry behind it, and there was less than an inch gap between the regiments, then from a targeting point of view, this front unit, even though it's a linear formation, is now considered a mass formation because there's less than an inch gap between the respective units.